For the most part, I don't advocate going out and buying a bunch of stuff. I'm more akin to the fix-it world, where you want to build it yourself or grow it yourself. Instead of buying compost, make it yourself, etc. And we'll get into that as we do the tour of the growing space here. But I don't like to see people get caught up in the ideology of having to go buy things to fix the problems that you may run up against in the garden. So there are some creative ways to avoid the problems in the first place and enhance the growing capacity of your garden beds so much that you sidestep a lot of the problems people run into. And we'll talk about various components that allow me to do that. I've been growing in this space for over 20 years, and these particular components that we'll go over today have helped me with consistent yields like this, and like this, and like this year after year, so that I can grow this kind of diversity of food each year with less work because of the biointensive approach and what components I'm using to grow that food. First things first, nutrient-dense food grows in living soil that's teeming with bacteria and mycelium and microorganisms that help those plants grow and do the nutrient cycling that brings you really good, healthy, nutrient-rich food. Now, the key to that living soil isn't found in a store, on a shelf, in a bottle, or something that you purchase. Most of it comes down to simply compost. Now, those of you that don't have space to compost, I understand. You have to buy organic compost. Just make sure it's OMRI certified organic compost. You don't want sludge, you don't want farm seconds, you don't want straight manure, you want finished, mature, organic compost. Now, that's only for people that have to buy it. For those of you that have space but haven't started composting yet, it's time for you to start. If you're trying to grow food and set up the infrastructure for the long term and close the loop on your gardening so that you don't have to be buying inputs, composting is the best way to start that process. This behind me is a traditional 4-bin recycled wood compost bin. So it has the general components required for compost. It's got aeration and plenty of air coming in from all sides. It's got a weather cover so snow and rain doesn't get into the pile and create too much moisture. It's kept shaded so that it's not in direct sun. You can put a roof over it so you could walk inside it, let's say, and not have to have these pro panel covers. But there's all kinds of configurations. This is a real simple way to do it. This 4-bin system has been here for over a decade. Build it with old recycled lumber, and it's pretty cheap to build. I found this old redwood that someone was recycling a deck, and it'll last another 10 years probably because it's recycled redwood. So build it out of something that can withstand weathering, big posts, big old lumber, something that can really withstand a beating if you're shoveling and using the garden fork in here when you're turning it over. You could get away with a 2-bin system if you have a smaller garden space, but the point is you really need to start recycling some of the organic material that comes on your property that's cuttings from the garden in the end of the season, or kitchen scraps, biologic vegetable matter that comes out of all of our kitchens. Recycling that organic matter is a very key component to create good mature compost that helps the organic system kind of supercharge, if you will. And if you're not using compost in your gardens, you're really at a loss as far as how fast you can grow food, how much you can enhance that system. Compost is the driving fuel that helps that soil come alive and supercharge your plants. Now, if you don't want to go this route and that's just too much of a project for you, you can simply get a stretched out piece of 4-foot garden fencing, put it in a circle, tie it off on the ends, and there's your compost bin. It's really that simple. You put this off to the side and you'll layer your compost within this fence. You can put a tarp over it for cover if it's winter or you're in a rainy environment, because you don't want it to go anaerobic. You want the aeration to continue in here. So this obviously has plenty of open space to create a viable thermophilic compost pile. You want to make sure it's big enough, say about a 4-foot by 4-foot cylinder as far as height and width, and that creates enough mass for this pile to heat up in a thermophilic environment and help break down that material. This is basically a 1974 upright freezer that I've restructured into a year-round worm bin, and all I'm doing here is taking vegetable scraps from the kitchen, and every few days you just have a little compost container on your sink or below your sink somewhere in the kitchen. You take that, the banana peels, the eggshells, everything else that's organic vegetable matter from your kitchen, you put it in here. There are worms in here that break it down, they accelerate the process, and worm bins are really good for small batch composting. So you never have to turn the whole bin like you would a traditional compost pile. You just add the vegetable scraps from the kitchen every few days. The worms take it from there and they produce worm castings that are a wonderful material to enhance your soil each year. In this bin, just from the kitchen scraps from 2 people, I generate about 600 pounds of worm castings each year that then gets turned back into the soil in the gardens. We all bring grocery bags of food into our homes every week. We carry it in by the bag load. Now, all the scraps and trimmings from that food should never leave the property. That is nutrient-rich material that can be broken down in worm bins or compost bins that then continually enhances your soil every year. So that closes the loop on your garden. That's one of the greatest ways to enhance the nutrient availability in your soil, is all the banana peels, the eggshells, the bread scraps, all that stuff has a lot of plant food embedded inside it. It just needs all the microorganisms and worms to break it down to make it plant available food again, and that compost is then spread around each spring, reworked into the soil, and we close the loop and help grow more food. It's really quite simple. Now, what I have here behind me are 3 different piles of leaves that I set in motion last fall, and these have several thousand worms in each pile. And what I've done here is, initially when I layered these leaves, I soaked them all layer by layer, and I inoculated the piles with soil, which has a lot of resident bacteria in it. That bacteria propagates and populates the pile and heats it up, especially since it's got the moisture and the aeration built into it. Those piles have stayed at about 100 degrees through our Colorado winter. So deep in these piles, the worms can get to their sweet spot of temperature range, and they can work to break down these piles into worm castings, and it takes about a year or a year and a half to do that. So this method I tend to call my lazy long-term fertility. Leaves in general have about twice the mineral content as manure by weight. We shouldn't be putting these in plastic bags in the dump where they break down and create methane. Instead, we should be using natural systems to break this leaf material down, return it to its base materials of mineral-rich material, and then put that back in the soil. And eventually, once you brush back the upper layer of dry leaves, there will be, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 wheelbarrow loads of composted leaves in the form of worm castings.
If these video highlights from Tom Bartels' presentation inspired you to think differently about gardening and creating a more self-sustaining food system at home, you're going to love the Superfood Garden Summit. We've brought together expert gardeners, soil educators, homesteaders, and food growing teachers to share practical strategies for growing healthier, more abundant food with less waste, lower costs, and more resilience. Grab your free ticket at superfoodgardensummit.com. It all starts June 2nd. See you there.